Hey, Ed, we're going to get to you in a second.
Okay.
Learning the technology here, folks. It's not as easy as public access. So thank you for joining us. Hi, Barry Kluger. I see you in chat. Hi, Abundant You Universe in chat. You're all welcome to join the chat. Ask any questions that you have. We're going to do a little special show today to talk about the great, legendary Joe Franklin. I started watching Joe Franklin when I was a little kid. I asked him if I could interview him for my high school newspaper. I was a huge fan, and I eventually wrote about him also, or used a picture of him in my college humor magazine, and he threatened me about that, and we'll get into that in a moment. And of course, he appeared on Beyond Vaudeville. So we were thrilled to have Joe there. We're going to watch that episode today. We're going to talk about it. And we have along with us a Joe Franklin expert. This guy is an expert on all things media. I first found out about him from some fan mail that he wrote to Beyond Vaudeville many years ago. What was this, 1993, 1994, back around then. And he was just a fan of Beyond Vaudeville. And we just got to know one another, and he hosts his own public access show, probably one of, if not the longest running public access show now in New York City, Media Funhouse, which is a really great show. And if you don't know about it yet, you should definitely look it up. So without further ado, let me introduce the one and only Ed Grant. Hi, Ed.
It's a pleasure to be here. I have remained a fan all these years. I've become a friend, but I've also been a fan of Beyond Vaudeville since I first turned it on and was like, what the hell is it? As everyone did. Kind of fell in love with the show.
And now I was just reviewing these letters. I haven't looked at these in decades. And I saw you were taking some exception to William Brown.
I had a problem with William Brown. I've come to accept him over the years, but yeah, it was just too much of the show because I was so dying to see Joey the Monkey and the other guests, and he would become your anchor man, and it just would drive me crazy. As I mentioned, the Georgie Jessel voice, the whole
thing, you were complaining about his preening for the camera, his loud Georgie Jessel voice, the tacky suit and glasses outfit. Yeah.
He also took away from Frank Hope from me. For me, he kind of, when I first saw him, I said, wait, is this like are they going to bring him on as like a brother or sister like they'd have on Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie, where they'd have, and I thought, is that a Frank Hope brother who's, because you both wore like leisure suits. It was both sort of but yeah.
And both had the name Brown, actually.
Yes, exactly. Yes, your real name. Yes.
Well, I'm glad you've come around on William Brown. Yes. He is beloved by many. And, another thing that I found looking through my files is my Joe Franklin file.
Wow.
Which, has these great images of Joe. He is in his messy office.
Man.
Here he is on the cover of TV Plus magazine, whatever that was. This was a promo for WOR.
Nice drawing.
I feel like Joe here because Joe used to do this on his show.
Yes, exactly. Lobby cards. Wow.
Pretty guide.
Nice.
Very dark black hair in this one.
Yeah, yes, his hair dye was amazing.
He was also doing something, the Joe Franklin Follies. Nice. Where he kind of embraced the camp later in his life.
Yeah, he became a stand-up comedian. It was torture. He would tell jokes. He would tell dirty jokes at different places I saw him speak at, and it was like really painful. In fact, in one time I saw him in the New York Underground Comedy Festival, or New York Comedy Festival, had a thing at a loft. I remember telling you and Steve Korn, who did Beyond Vaudeville, that he was basically doing Beyond Vaudeville without knowing he was doing it. He had been on your show once, but he was there at a table, and literally, I swear to God, there was a piece of notebook paper that someone had written the Joe Franklin show on. It was identical to Beyond Vaudeville. And it was that's the time I was in an elevator with him on the way up. And I didn't recall the whole story we might get into about him threatening my life. But I just said, you have that legal case against Sarah Silverman now because of the Aristocrats movie. I never raped that woman. I never touched her at all. She was making a joke. And he started discussing this with me in the elevator. But then he brought on these younger people who someone had helped him book. And he asked one of the women about the original female stand-up comedian, and I'm blanking on her name, before Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers. There was a woman who did
Jody Fields.
No, in the 50s, there was a woman who did housewife comedy, who did wife comedy, and I'm blanking on her name completely on the air. But he asked her about her. And I mean, Joan Rivers, she introduced Joan Rivers because Rivers was still coin of the realm by whenever this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And she said, well, I'm a big fan of Joan Rivers. And he's like, yeah, but are you a fan of? And he mentioned a female comedian who hadn't been seen since Sullivan in the 50s. It was a woman who was the original pre-Phyllis Diller housewife comedian.
Wow.
Like,
not Irma Bombeck. No.
I can't do a name. Yeah, I can't do the name for whatever reason. It's freezing up on me. I'll find it like 3 hours from now. But it was such a weird name that I'm like, that woman, wow, she doesn't have an album. I don't think there was there's no way to remember that woman unless you go to Paley Center and watch old Ed Sullivan reruns. She's not someone who's commonly known. But yeah, Joe in his career, it fluctuated, man. Those final places.
Now, Ed, you mentioned that Joe was going to sue you or something.
He was going to kill. He was going to have me killed. Basically, the way he explained it on the phone, I did an article on him in early 80s, mid 80s in my college, Sarah Lawrence College. I did a piece where I introduced him because I had a French guy come who was a boyfriend of one of my friends, and I found myself in the weird position of trying to explain to someone from outside America who the hell Joe Franklin was and what he did. And he was like, well, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand. Why is he asking one person about the other? I said, that's what Joe does, is he asks the nuclear physicist about aerobics, and he asked the aerobics instructor about nuclear. And he did. So I thought that's a great article. I wrote it for my newspaper, sent it to him in the hopes I would do like you did and maybe get an interview or whatever. And nothing happened, no answer. Then 5 or 6 years later, I'm working for TV Key, this now defunct organization where we wrote up little things, and I would write feature pieces for them, and King Features would syndicate them around the country if they felt it was worthy. I did one on Joe, and he was totally willing to talk, and he talked on the phone, and at the end I threw in, I wrote about you once before for the Sarah Lawrence College newspaper, which I figured he never remembered. He goes, that wasn't funny, because I had mentioned his ever-changing hair color. When I reread the piece after I got off the phone with him, I was like, how did I insult him? I said, that was a Valentine to you, Mr. Franklin. I didn't mean to insult you. The men with the gravelly voices heard that. 3 of people, and then the final line was 4 people have written articles like yours. 3 of them are now dead. And I was literally flabbergasted on the phone. I was literally like, I'm sorry. I said, if I offended you, I was just making fun. But his hair color did change. I was noting that he had changed to Axel's theme and gotten rid of the, 9th Street, 12th Street rag. He had changed his look in the 80s. And I thought that was worth mentioning on the show, in the article.
And of course, Drew Friedman had gotten
sued, and Uncle Floyd got sued. And there's an amazing history of him suing people for no reason whatsoever, and then dropping the suit for like incredible amounts of money that nobody had. Floyd has told the story many times. He was presented with the official summons, the lawsuit, whatever it is, the thing they serve you with. He was served while he was doing a telethon in New Jersey. He was about to go on or about to come off, and someone handed him Joe Franklin's lawsuit.
Well, we had put him on the cover of the NYU Plague, the humor magazine. And somebody had taken a trip and had a photo of the fjords. And we just had Joe in his tie and kind of cut and paste him into the middle of the fjords. So it didn't make any sense. There was nothing malicious about it. And, sent these to Joe's office. And I called him up and I was like, oh, Mr. Franklin, did you get the magazines with you on the cover? And there was silence. And he said, be very careful, my friend, what you do. And like you, I just was like, what was that? What did I do? Why am I being threatened? Anyway, let's we're
by the way, the second part of the story is that I go to his office. We did make amends. I go to his office to get a photo, because this is how old this was in the late 80s when you had to get a photo. So he gives me a photo of himself with the top hat and the cane. So, don't make fun of me was his basic message to me. It's gonna be serious piece. You swear on your mother, right? And I said on the phone, I swore fidelity to the oath of Joe Franklin. I go to pick up the picture, and he gives me a picture of himself with the top hat and a cane, like, in a completely ridiculous Fred Astaire-like pose. And it was like, okay, I won't make fun of you. I'll just run the picture. That's, whatever. And in the article, in the actual phone interview, he said about Dizzy Gillespie, he says, when I have Dizzy Gillespie on, I don't talk about jazz. He's talked about that all the time, the trumpet. I talk about, air pollution, women's rights, penal reform. Those are the 3 things. He said, that's what Dizzy really wants to talk about. So he gave me his formula for the Joe Franklin.
And that's what people want to hear. People want to hear Dizzy Gillespie talk about this. So, all right, Ed, I'm going to run this episode that we did with Joe Franklin. This was early on in our run, and it was very exciting for us to have him there. This was at our first studio way up at 218th Street. Wow. And I'm going to add this.
Once again to the Beyond Vaudeville, the award-winning Beyond Vaudeville program. As you can see from the lineup we have today, it's a very full and very special program. We're going to have on some very special people to us, but especially one man who we have been watching for many years, and it's a very, very, very special night for us. I just want to show some things before we get started. That got the Richard Dawson Family Feud book, all about the show. Is you can find that. I got that at a garage sale, and a bunch of cars for only $1. And also there's a Mr. T. A Mr. T doll with the wrestling thing, and also there is the I found my Johnny West doll that I thought I lost, but I found it in my closet, and there it is. Okay. Also there's they trim a tree for the holidays with all the Sesame Street things on that you put on the tree. Okay, David, how are you today? Everything fine? Okay, David's going to be his regular self, I see, once again. We're going to have a very, very special treat later on. Some of my friends are going to do a special Halloween surprise later on at the end of the show. Okay, please, I'd like to introduce my first guest now. And you all know him and love him because he's seen all over the country, even more places than we're seen, and just in New York. Please welcome Mr. Joe Franklin.
So, Ed, actually, Joe did get national presence, right? He was on the Superstation.
Yeah, it was just like TBS was seen in the rest of the country. Channel 9 was seen in different markets in the country.
Yeah, okay.
It got syndicated at that.
So here comes Joe. Now, Joe had been, just prior to coming out, he was napping on the couch in the green room. We were getting ready and putting the set up, and we went out, and there he was, like lying on his back in his suit, just taking a cat nap. And here he is, all rested and ready to go.
Do.
It's a pleasure to be here on the Uncle Flo on the Soupy Sales Show. Is it what? Oh, the Bob Hope, no Hope. What is it? Frank Hope.
Frank Hope. Just like Bob, but
Frank. I've been a fan of yours ever since I've been a little kid, and I've always wanted to be on your program. Many years ago, about 1926, I said I want to be on the TV with Frank Hope, and it finally happened, and I'm very, very honored.
Yeah, Joe was just kidding. We've only been on for about a year and a half, but you're just pulling our leg. Joe Franklin is a very funny man. In addition to his duties as a talk show host, and this is the award that we got from the Paragon Cable Awards, and Joe was there, and it's. It broke when David, one time on the show, thought it got out of hand and broke it. But anyway, also on that show, which we showed, the award show, David didn't want to shake hands with Mr. Franklin, and I just wanted to apologize to you for the way he was behaving that night. And David, maybe you should apologize yourself.
You should apologize.
I shouldn't apologize because I
What is
did
this?
Right.
You're on TV. This weird shit.
All right.
Look at this.
Okay.
Is this a suit? You
All
call this a suit?
Okay.
Look at this.
Okay. All right, let's go.
What do you think is going on here?
Okay, David. Okay, if you want to ruin the show, why don't you just go outside and ruin it and just make believe you're ruining it instead of being here and ruining it. It's been trying to get Mr. Franklin on the show for a long time, and let's do this right.
We could mention that I was the MC. I was the host of that big award show.
That was right, and we all appreciated that from the public access for you to.
Well, that night I gave up a $4 job and a $2 job and a couple of small ones in order to be here that night. But I enjoyed it. I really was very honored to have been chosen.
Now, seriously, Mr. Franklin, you did more or less invent the talk show. How did
That was one of his claims, correct, Ed?
That he invented the talk show, yeah, because he's on so early in the 50s before Steve Allen does the Tonight Show. I think he's after Broadway Open House with Jerry Lester, though, which is considered the very beginning on NBC. I have a question for you, just briefly. He reacted brilliantly and was able to put aside, like, you only had a few guests who actually, like, Al Lewis yelled back at him. You had very few guests who actually did engage with David. And that's a weird moment, because there's the moment where the person could be going, why is this man screaming next to me and stuff?
Well, we referenced these public access awards that had been done by Paragon Cable. And for the most part, it was like, a lot of public affairs shows and whatever. And Joe was hosting it, and it did go live. So we met him that night, and we got like most original show or something they gave us. And so he had some familiarity with us, which I guess
so
helped.
He knew David's shtick. He knew that he wasn't going to be punched personally by David.
I guess, but do you ever really know that you're not going to be hit by David? I don't know about that.
So this is 19. What year is this? This is 89? Because you're on for a year.
Probably, yeah, somewhere around 88, 89. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
By the way, someone in the comments, actually, two people mentioned Jean Carroll.
That's the name. That's the name. Exactly. You guys, thank you so much for Jean Carroll. That's the name of the woman that he suddenly referenced to this young girl who was 20 years old who said, I don't know her, but I love Joan Rivers, as if I'm giving you an old person's name. But Jean Carroll, thank you so much.
So points go to Barry Kluger and Holden 190 for coming up with that. Okay, here we go.
you come up with the idea to do that?
Well, that's a good question. I was just on radio about 36 years ago, just doing radio, and they asked me if I might occupy 1 hour a day on TV, and I said I'd be very happy. TV then was only on, Frank, from 5 o'clock in the evening till sign-off. There was no such thing as daytime TV.
Right.
They asked me if I would occupy an hour a day, and I was bold enough to say yes. They asked me what kind of a show would I like to do. I said, I'd like to do a show maybe of people talking face to face, nose to nose, eyeball to eyeball. They said, Joe, you're crazy. Who's going to watch? The word is television. You got to give them vision. You got to give them seltzer bottles, pratfalls. Got to give them, burlesque skits and baggy pants. But I defied them. They said the word is television. You got to give them. But I defied them. I did the first talk show, and I've been talking for about 36 and a half years now, I guess.
And that was before.
And he mentioned radio, of course.
Right.
He continued to go on WOR radio right up till pretty late in his life, right? What was his time slot? It
changed at one point. It was Saturday nights from midnight to was it 5 or 4? And then he moved it back an hour and would put in old radio shows. He'd start it really at 1 o'clock. It would be him and Richie Ornstein. The single best thing on the show was the trivia contest, where he'd go, Richie Ornstein, his anchor man, would say, Joe, fill in the blank, Laurel and blank. They were the easiest trivia questions. Groucho, Chico, and, who's the Chico, excuse me. And, those kind of questions where it'd be who was married to Richard Burton? There was one time he asked him a question Joe didn't know hippie culture. And he asked him, who did Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and Papas marry for a week, who was a major star in the 50s and 60s? And the answer was Dennis Hopper. And Joe Franklin goes, never heard of him. He didn't know who Dennis Hopper was. It's Dennis Hopper had already made the comeback with Blue Velvet. And it's Dennis Hopper was in Rebel with that. Joe wasn't really, if it wasn't mainstream Hollywood glamour, if it wasn't major studio stuff, he wasn't aware of those kind of people at all.
It was just such a strange program to be existing in the late 1990s in the number one market in New York City, and coming through this WOR crackly AM radio, and Joe is still playing crooners from the 1920s.
Yeah. He still played Gene Autry. He'd do for Mother's Day. There's a Gene Autry song about little kids at a grave of their parents. And there was one night I was walking home late at night when I lived in Long Island City to get to Astoria, and he was playing Betty Davis doing I'm Writing a Letter to Daddy, the actual whole song, which was on, I guess, the soundtrack to whatever. And it was Jesus, this is creepy. There's something innately creepy about hearing that song at 2 a.m. as you're walking in an empty street, hearing this old lady croon. It was just very bizarre. But where else was I going to hear that? He played that John Wayne while all the albums you would show as Frank on the show, he would play unironically, completely unironically. Joe would play those albums, and I was
somebody's writing. Holden 190 says, I saw Joe Franklin at an old time radio convention, and his hair was orangey.
That's true. It
so
changed from decade to decade.
This is addressing your issue with Joe,
Yes,
right?
he would just, and it was seemed like, wasn't really a wig or whatever it was. He was dyeing it bizarre colors, as he went on throughout the years. But
All right, let's go back to Joe.
Before Carson and all these guys were doing it. Now, how has the things changed show business and all the things in all those years?
I think it's gotten very slick. It's gotten very, very organic. It's gotten very plastic, non-organic, I should say. That's why it's fun to be here, where it's not so slick, not so official. This is cozy and intimate and warm. I like to be on this kind of a format where you never know what's going to happen next.
So we're cozy and intimate and warm, and we're not. We've never been called slick. I don't remember anyone telling us that.
No, not even sick. But the word, I guess, is we're from the bones. We're from the bones. We're unrehearsed. We're spontaneous. And I think that's what TV is all about. That's what entertainment is all about.
Now, I've been watching you for many years, as I've said a couple of times already, and I say it because I mean it. I used to wake up very early in the morning, and I didn't want to watch the cartoon shows because Joe Franklin would show all the old-time movie comedians and all those things, and it was something different from everything else that was on. And I remember that you said that your favorite person was, no, not your favorite, but one of the big people that you had was Bing Crosby, and you melted when he came in.
I guess out of the 148,000 interviews that I've had, I've interviewed 148,000 people.
Do you take any exception to that number, Ed?
I wouldn't be able to calculate, but he's at one point we could go through his fables, the people he said he had on that he never had on, people he had affairs with, different stories.
That might be a nice follow-up too. Well, we'll see what he has to say here.
Yeah,
Mr. Hope. And I would say my favorites were Bing Crosby, Eddie Cantor, Ronald Reagan 5 times. I've interviewed the ones where you read in magazines. They never did a talk show. I've got the photographs to prove it that I interviewed. I mean, I read in the magazine where John Wayne never did a talk show. Cary Grant never did one. Elvis Presley never did one. I've had them all. I've had every super person, every superstar, except one. No, except 2. Uncle David. No, Greta Garbo. And you two gentlemen. But I'm not going to quit till I get Greta Garbo.
Oh, okay. Well.
Did he ever get Greta Garbo?
He had a story later on because his stories just grew and grew. One of them was that he got a call in from a woman who claimed she was either the caregiver or the nurse for Greta Garbo, and he could hear sobbing in the background. I definitely heard Joe tell the story on WOR. One night we had Ms. Garbo was out there listening to us. He had played an audio track from one of her movies, and he got a call from a nurse who said, Ms. Garbo is here and she'd like to thank you for playing that. He could hear an old lady crying in the background.
Someone named Sour Milk is asking, when did he interview Elvis?
He never did. There's no pictures. That's the thing I talk about in this blog entry I wrote on my Media Funhouse blog, is that he had an amazing, chock-full, it used to be on Vimeo, this amazing thing where they play the 9th Street Rag or whatever it was, and he would show you Sal Mineo, Burt Lancaster. He'd run through them all, and he never had pictures of those people he just mentioned, Cary Grant, Elvis Presley, John Wayne. John Lennon is another one he later said he had on. He was on Bob Costa saying he had him on for an entire week because I had Yoko on. He had Yoko on the radio show. There's a photo of that. That's bizarre. But he never had John anywhere. There's no photo of him and John. And he's saying to us, basically, I had evidence. Also, he said Charlie Chaplin was when he had on. Chaplin was already in Switzerland at that time. He would have had to have come back illegally. He was considered a communist, et cetera, et cetera. So
and yet there were big people that did appear on his show, because many were starting out, like Barbra Streisand was on his show, and
Woody Allen, and he had anybody who was on Broadway, and even in the later years on YouTube, you can catch this amazing clip of Marty Feldman promoting one of his, In God We Trust or whatever movie, and Angela Lansbury is on the sofa, and I'm like, oh my, they don't have the Angela Lansbury segment because she was there for charity, but it's like the two people you've heard of on Joe Franklin at the same time, 2 major stars.
Someone named 2000 Maddie says, my mom was on his show. Then maybe 20 years later, I was on, and he remembered her last name and asked me. He had an amazing memory. So I guess he did have a good memory, right?
Yeah. He could remember the things we wrote about him 10 years later, and 5 years later, he could I was threatened by that. How could you remember a college newspaper article from 5 years before? You figure you throw it in the garbage.
But he just tended to embellish a little bit.
Yeah, it got really, really. I don't know if we should go into this later or now or whatever, but yeah, he had one story that is my favorite one in his book. His book Up Late has some amazing tales.
And what was that story?
I'll just do briefly. This book, Up Late, with I don't know if you can see it with the, but this book written in 1995 has nasty stories about Uncle Floyd, which aren't true. We won't quote those. Talks about sleeping with Marilyn Monroe. Talks about sleeping with Jane Mansfield. Won't go into those either. But at one point, he was doing his show in the ABC studios, and a man died, and this was proved on the New York radio message board run by that guy Alan Sniffen. They had an actual guy who said, I was there in the studio when a man died on Joe Franklin. So this has been definitely verified that a guy died, because you assume Joe had so many shows on so many days and so many years, somebody must have died on air like Cabot had. And basically in the next room, the debates for 1960s presidential election were taking place. So JFK and Richard Nixon came in the room to ask him, can we help you? Is there anything wrong? And they helped him. They tried to resuscitate the body. They called 911. No one else but them, just Nixon and JFK. And basically the man was dead. He was sorry to say. It's on page 106. I just looked it up before we went on the air.
Wow.
So it's really Nixon. And yeah, as a friend said to me, that's the number one thing a political candidate wants, is to be seen moving a dead body in a studio with a live camera, So anyway, these stories got crazier and crazier as the years went on. They just,
So the lesson there might be that Nixon did not know CPR.
Yes. Neither he nor JFK knew how to revive someone. Excuse me.
All right, let's go back to Joe.
I don't think David would ever do it because he has the wrong kind of attitude for things, I think. And maybe someday you can find me a different co-host, so I don't have to have him on here acting like that all the time. Now you said I've heard you say that Barbra Streisand used to camp out in your office.
Well, not that anybody discovers anybody. I didn't discover anybody, Mr. Hope, but I did give the first exposure ever on television to people, including Barbra Streisand, Flip Wilson, Woody Allen, Bill Cosby, Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, Joan Rivers, Tiny Tim. Remember Tiny Tim? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was invited to his wedding. Remember when he was married on the Johnny Carson show? I was
Miss
invited.
Vicky?
Yeah, Miss Vicky. I was invited to the wedding. I couldn't make it though. I couldn't find a formal shopping bag, but I was invited to the wedding.
Okay.
I just hope he's saving his money for the time when his beauty fades.
Well, if he's watching, Tiny, we want to have you on sometime too. Please come on.
Tiny is a superstar. He really is. I gave the first exposure to Miss Harlow before she became world famous. I guess Bette Midler, and a bunch of people like that.
When Mr. Frankel said that Miss Harlow, that's going to be a special treat further on in the show. So stay tuned. Now, you've written some books, and you have any others in the works?
I've written about 35 books. My current book is now in its fourth printing, because the first three printings were blurred. So it's now in its fourth printing. No, I'm only fooling. I wrote a famous book once called Classics of the Silent Screen. I got one coming out soon called Joe Frankel's Memory Lane Cookbook. Tells you what Eddie Cantor used to like meatballs, Clark Gable used to like lox and bagels. Tells you the recipes of bygone stars. So it'll be fun.
What kind of foods do you like?
I like very simple foods like pheasant under glass, champagne, pate, codfish balls, mothballs, matzo balls, anything simple.
You're right in Times Square, your office, and anytime I go around there, I always stop at the Nathan's for the hot dogs. It's a good, seems like a pretty good deal that you get there.
They're not as good as they used to be, but they're still adequate.
Now, you were telling us that that Vaudeville Isn't Dead was the name of your first show. Was the show that you did first on the radio was called Vaudeville Isn't Dead?
I broke into the radio business, Mr. Hope, as the man who chose the records for a gentleman named Martin Block, the late and great disc jockey on a program of sacred memory called the Make Believe Ballroom. And I used to choose his records, and he liked me so much he got me my own radio show on WNEW when I was about 17 years old, and that show was called Vaudeville Isn't Dead, every Sunday night for a half hour, and I played the old records by Ethel Merman and Rudy Valley and Kate Smith and people like that. And then I just stayed with nostalgia. I think that nostalgia is kind of a miraculously untapped culture out there. I think that you got to have a gimmick. And so you've got a gimmick that your setup here is suave and slick, and I've got the same, my gimmick. And you've got very lively, animated people here.
Hey, my friends, Well, not him, but some of my puppet friends.
Yes, they are very lively.
So someday we'll be nostalgia, right? Like years from now, we'll be like the old people from the past.
These will be the good old days many years from now, you're right. And people will look back at us and say, Joe Franklin, a legend in his own room.
Okay.
Or in his own mind, whatever it might be.
And you'll still be doing your show?
Well, I intend to phase out in a year or two and go behind the scenes and produce new talk show hosts. I've got a company now, a publicly traded vehicle called Joe Franklin Productions. It's going to be producing radio and TV shows and home videos. And so I'm going to go like Merv Griffin and a few people like that and go behind the scenes. And I've spoken to almost everybody, so there's not that many left to talk to, honestly. But
I saw in the paper that you're going to do a game show and plus an exercise video
we're
tape.
calling it Nostalgia Size. So it's a combination of nostalgia and exercise. We're going to call the game show Joe's Ask It Basket. And we're going to do another one called Answers from the Dancers. I'll go out on the dance floor and tap people on the shoulder and ask them a question, something elegant like that.
Okay. Well,
I don't think any of those projects
None
ever
of those came
through
to
it.
be. Those are amazing. I don't think he could ever resist being the host of anything that produced for another host, because even at the end, he was doing those radio spots on was it the Bloomberg station? He was on the Bloomberg radio station here in New York doing in this date in history, the great, Al Jolson took a tumble, blah, 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 blah. So he kept going himself till the very, very end.
Did he? Do you believe he wrote 35 books at this point in his life?
Well, he mentions the classics of the silver screen. You have to open that book and look. He puts prominently researcher William K. Everson, who was a noted teacher at NYU, who was like a god to people who research silent films. He wrote the films of Laurel and Hardy and The Bad Guys, all these films of type books. So yeah, actually Joe did write that book because it's written in his style. It's written in the staccato. Laurel and Hardy were a funny duo. One was fat and one was thin. So it's actually researched by this genius guy who knew everything about silent film, but it was written by Joe because it's that staccato, insane rhythm that only Joe Franklin could do. So,
Wow.
But yeah, 35. I mean, they were like paperbacks. They were like trivia quizzes, like the Whatever Happened To type books. They do, Joe Franklin's cookbook, those kind of things. They're not really going for a lot on the open market,
Well, people are writing in the comments. Remember the Ramones were great on his show. I think he had Rudy Valley.
Many times.
When he had Madonna on. And somebody mentioned that Trey's World mentions that they've never heard of the guy, but he has a good radio voice. Trey, look Joe Franklin up on YouTube.
Yes.
And you can hear some of his old radio shows. You can see some of his old TV shows, and he was extraordinary. Let's go back.
Well, we're going to keep an eye on those, and it sounds like you're busier than ever. And please stick around, and we're going to have some more guests. Let's introduce now, please, our second guest for tonight. He's a very popular New York artist, and we've had him on our show, and we have him again because he always has something new up his sleeve. Let's welcome, please, Constantine Bokov. Hello. Hello, Constantine. You brought a friend with you tonight, a new friend.
Yes,
who is that?
This is very unusual. This is my second self.
Okay.
Only recently I discovered it. Last time at your last show I was demonstrating my painting with my food.
Right.
But now I stopped painting with clothes. Recently I discovered that was not me who was painting. That was my second self.
Okay. And what is his name? Is that Constantine?
His name is Koka.
Korka. And that means, David, stop please during the interview. David, please. All right, don't put the puppet. Don't bother him with the puppet if he's going to do that. I'm sorry, Constantine. His name is Gorky?
No, his name is Koka.
Korka.
Koka.
Okay.
Yes, like Coca-Cola, but
Oh,
without Coca-Cola.
Oh, okay.
We don't drink Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Yes.
And those are clothes that you wear too, right? Or no? You wore those clothes?
Yes, he wear all my clothes, and not only that, he painted my clothes without my permission.
Oh, he painted the...
Yes, and he is an artist, and he is making many crazy things without my permission. He go to Subway to make graffiti there, and every time I afraid I am in trouble, and I
maybe...
I told him, but he don't listen to me.
So maybe so you have to.
This is example of his work, you see?
He did that on your.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
All right. Well, let's you stick around, Constantine, because we still have lots more, and we're going to do lots more talking. But now we have to get to something, another special act, and this.
By the way, Constantine was born in the Ukraine, and he is still doing and making his art. I believe he's still living in Manhattan somewhere. If anybody has a lead on where he is and can get us in touch with him, we'd love to catch up with him.
Wow.
All right.
I think you're in for quite a surprise. You're about to see an 84-year-old stripper who does a gay 90s strip tease. And her name is Leola Harlow. Please welcome Leola Harlow.
All the boys follow me. Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. It's just as simple as ABC. I never try hard to get them. I try to keep them away. I never dine them, never wine them. I've got another way. It's just the way that I walk, and the way that I talk, and the way that I flirt with my eyes. It's a way that I feel when I kick up my heel and I handle a little surprise. It's a way that I glide and the way that I slide. It's a way that I just can't explain. It's a way that I dance and the way that I prance. Then it drives, oh, it drives them insane. It's just the clothes that I wear and the hose that I wear and the passionate way that I sway. And it's just what I show when I kick up my toe. Oh, that's the way that I keep them away. It's a cute little way, hard to imitate, and it's a sweet little way that can fascinate. It's just the way I reveal what I ought to conceal. It's a cute little way of my own.
you wishing that had gone on a little longer?
No, that was for your show because you used to jam 1 million people in. That was a long dance routine. My God.
Well, we were still finding our way back then. It's funny how the chat just went completely silent during that number. People are numb right now. Although it's starting back up, somebody wrote, I've seen the episode before, but seems so much weirder right now. And then someone responded, I think because we can't skip forward on this live.
Right, exactly. That 1.5, 2 speed. My God, that was a long number. And you mentioned on the preceding show you did with Scott, the lack of microphones. When she tries to vamp her way through it and go, I've been doing this since I was 81. We can't hear it. I could barely hear that. I discern that. But yeah, that's the problem.
Now, the thing, and I don't know if it's addressed, we'll get to the interview. There's probably a brief interview with her, but we've discovered that this woman was actually in a very famous John Cassavetes movie, right?
Right. She's in Husbands. She's actually in the very drunken scene where the 3 leads are getting over, they're mourning their friend and having like a wild party at a bar. And the cameraman goes around them a lot, like 360 degrees. I think John Cassavetes sort of said, I'm going to go with this. And this is an improv scene. And she is the one that they're sort of tormenting. She's not singing well enough. So all 3 men start yelling at her, give us emotion. And Peter Falk actually undresses and takes off her shirt at one point to say to her, give me something, give me something. And she seems bewildered. And you had just come up with some material from Raymond Carney, the official or unofficial biographer of Cassavetes, who said that he spoke to her and she thought she was being castigated like by the actors out of character, that they were just telling her, you're doing terrible. She didn't realize, I guess it was a scene in the film and it was going to actually, it was footage that they were shooting that was going to be used in the film.
Amazing. I can't remember where we found her. We're introduced to her. It was either by Joe himself or Richard Rothman, who was kind of the poor man's Joe Franklin.
Right.
Let's see. Automatic Selector says she's actually in damn good shape for her age. 55 plus ? Don't know.
Well, she says she's 84. Yeah, I think in your intro or somewhere it was said she was 84. And she says, I've been doing this only since I'm 81. That was one of her lines that she was vamping when she couldn't detach her pieces that were taking forever. So then so if she's 84 so she's born in 1905. So she's even 65 years old in Husbands is about 1970 or so. So she's about 65 there and she's much older here. So yeah, she is pretty good shape for her age. Years
later, we met Fruity Nutcake, the rapping granny, who also did a strip tease. And it was a little more provocative than this. Well,
she kept it going too. She had the patter. She had the verbiage. Yeah. She knew what to say.
Okay, let's go back.
Have a seat. Down.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, and just grab one of those microphones there.
And I sit right next to these beautiful gentlemen.
Well, yeah, maybe you should say that about Mr. Franklin, but not about my co-star, because he doesn't deserve that kind of thing. I have a photo here of you, and this was done. Mr. Franklin, am I supposed to hold this a certain way when I show it on the? Somebody told me that I always make it shine too much. Okay.
Beautiful shot.
That's little Abner. I was Daisy May.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this was 1983, it says?
Yeah, I was 79. I was just a kid.
Okay. Now, you were on the Morton Downey show recently, and that's where we saw you. Me and my friend Bill Coleman, we saw you on the Morton Downey, and what was it like meeting him?
He's a pussycat, and I probably am going to destroy his image completely because I know he doesn't want the word spread around that he cares and he's loving and he's kind and he's generous. I'm supposed to say he's obnoxious. It's terrible. I have to build up the image that he wants to create. It's very hard for me to do that.
That's, sometimes the way David acts up on the show, I think he does the same kind of thing. And, maybe he needs to be... maybe people need to call him a pussycat more often and straighten him out a little bit.
David is very good to his family, I heard. He never goes home at night.
Oh, I wouldn't. No, don't say anything like that, Mr. Franklin. I don't think it's a good idea. Now, you were also, Leola, in the newspaper for Miss Senior New York City, I have here.
Yes, Wednesday. I competed with, there were 11 of us.
Right.
And everybody sang so beautifully. And I thought, oh, I can't sing. I had better do something else. So I did a Spanish dance because I was a Spanish dancer for some 50 years, I guess, 40 years maybe.
Are you really 84?
Well, I'll be 84 next month.
I can't believe that. You look 44.
That's right.
Thank
you do.
you,
You
Joe
don't look
Franklin.
84. But I saw in here that you keep yourself young by putting Crisco oil.
Well, that's for my complexion.
That's
Girls, you don't have to spend a lot of money, all that fancy stuff. You can just get a bottle of Crisco oil, and it's like baby oil, and it doesn't cost much.
And you just discovered that? Did somebody give you that idea? Or?
No, I ran out of cold cream one time, so I got the can of Crisco, and it worked. And I thought, why pay for all this fancy cold cream when Crisco works?
Okay.
I think they ought to give me a commercial, don't you?
I think so. We're not supposed to say commercials on this, and that wasn't supposed to be a commercial, but that's just what you use, so I guess we can say it.
This lady is a commercial Uncle Frank for vitality and energy and beauty, isn't she?
That's right.
Age, you know, there are 3 ways of knowing that you're getting older. 3 ways of knowing that you're getting older. The first way is loss of memory. Second 2 ways I can't remember.
I thought you were going to do something like
I'm
that.
serious, though.
He's got the most fantastic memory.
And also a good sense of humor, like I said before. And I think many people don't realize that when you're doing your talk show, because you just, you have to keep a certain image, I guess.
One time, Frank at and Leola,
Yes.
at a big banquet. There was a banquet for Adolf Zucker. Remember the famous movie maker Adolf Zucker from Paramount Pictures? He was 100 years old. They had a banquet in his honor when he was 100, and he bumped into Jack Benny, who then was 77. And Adolf Zucker, who was 100, says to Jack Benny, who's 77, he says, "My God, are you still around?" he was 100, and he was amazed that somebody 77 was still alive.
Now, Constantine, are you busy at work down there, or you usually like to sketch people?
No, I like to show you interesting thing.
Okay.
I could close my eyes.
Right.
And my coca.
Right.
He'll draw with my hand without my participation.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're gonna have your eyes closed, and Coca
Yes.
is gonna
No.
paint. Mitch, is it possible to Mitch, the cameraman? We have 2 minutes. Oh, okay. All right. You're gonna have to do this quick, Constantine.
Yes, this is quick.
Okay.
This is very quick.
How do we know you're not peeking under the thing?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
This is enough.
Okay.
Okay, now.
Let me ask you something. How come every show, even out of left field, you always mention Al Jolson and Eddie Cantor? Even has nothing to do with what you're talking about. It's always Eddie Cantor, Al Jolson.
Also, I want to mention that I got a telegram on my anniversary this week from the president of the United Cigar Company in my pocket right now. I'm going to read it to you. No, Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson, to me, David, are like good luck tokens. They were my first 2 friends in show business, so I figure by mentioning their name, I keep their memories alive, and it's like a personal bit of gratification for me.
Mr. Franklin, it was very cordial of you to respond to that, and you didn't even have to the way he's acting. But that's the kind of gentleman Mr. Franklin is. Now, you did that, Constantine, with your eyes closed.
I did it with my eyes closed, but this is not me. This is Coca who
Coca?
did everything.
Okay, and that's
Only for
David.
1 year I am not painting. He is painting.
Okay, that's David there. That's David you painted there. That Coca painted. You like that, David? Okay,
This
David.
is not me, please.
That's
this
Coca
is not
that
me.
did that.
I am
All right.
sorry.
Okay,
Not
let's
me,
stop
I tell
now.
you, this is Coca.
Okay.
This is him.
It's Coca.
Yeah.
No, David.
Not me.
David, sit. You're gonna hurt Coca. Okay, we're gonna wrap things up now. And here's a special surprise Halloween treat. Oh boy.
Oh, my.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Don't get too wild now. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Franklin, thank you again for being on
Please
this show.
invite me back and come on my show.
Okay, and Leola, thank you very much. And Constantine, thank you. And we're going to close with the Bee Gees music. Okay, David, sit down.
All right. Yeah. So
Wow.
that was actually John Walsh who
Was that him? Okay, Joey the Monkey. Wow.
I guess maybe that was before Joey the Monkey was around, I guess.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So so I think Joe actually showed himself to be, a really good sport, a funny guy. Somebody wrote Joe is loaded with jokes, and he was. He kept bringing the jokes out. I guess you've heard some of those jokes before.
He would tell the same jokes over and over. That was his thing at the end, was when he would host stuff, anything, any award ceremony, anything. He's up at a lectern, he would begin to tell jokes, and it was, oh my God.
So Ed, so how long have you been doing Media Funhouse, and who were some of the people you've interviewed on the show?
Oh God! We turned 30 this year. We turned 30 just last month, actually, in September. Actually, 2 months ago. In September, or a month ago, we turned 30 years. We've been on since '93, and my favorite of all time was Peter Ustinov. But I've interviewed. We had done shorter interviews, longer interviews. So we cover everything from high art to low trash, as I call it. So I've done people like Russ Meyer and Roger Corman and that kind of exploitation filmmakers who I love, and also high art filmmakers, Ken Russell and Jane Birkin. I've talked to a bunch of different people from that strata too. So I sort of Wong Kar-wai when he was on his way up. I tend to get people when they're on their way up and they're becoming famous. The French director Francois Ozon, and then sort of maybe when they're a little, like Beyond Vaudeville, like when they're a little aged, they've aged like a fine wine.
I beg your pardon?
They're sort of, they're aged, but they're wonderful, and they tell stories that are amazing. So I've had some great times interviewing those people, and talking to older. I've talked to a lot of the blonde goddesses, Stella Stevens and Carol Lindley, and those people too. And they have the best stories generally. They're the people who've kept the stories throughout the years and can suddenly take you off into a tangent. Carol Lindley took me off into a tangent about Fantasy Island I didn't even count on, and it was like 10 minutes of her talking about Fantasy Island, which I love. So yeah, it depends on the person.
I got to be your cameraman on a show once.
Yes, the Shelley Berman. The first one I put on YouTube is Shelley Berman, who actually did an impromptu piece for us that he never did anywhere else. That piece about you're on the phone and you're hearing the menu and you don't know if they're ever going to have an option that will match what you've called about. And I thought that was like, wow, he's doing a bit here that he never subsequently put on a record or anything. So
wow,
yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a very interesting interview.
And how do people find this? Because you don't put them all up on YouTube, right?
I don't. Well, that's a copyright, because public access is still much freer than the internet is, and I can use footage as I want because it's fair use, because I'm doing critical commentary and I'm showing abridged movies and clips from 50 films by different people. So yeah, where you have mediafunhouse.com, mediafunhouse.blogspot.com is where I wrote, and you can find my Joe Franklin pieces there. And yeah, I write for I read for a site called This Dish, but the main resource is mediafunhouse.com, which can then send you when we're still on late Saturday nights right after Saturday Night Live, if anybody's still watching that in real time, late Saturday, early Sunday, 1 a.m. on channel 1997 here in Manhattan, which is right beneath channel 1, New York 1 on the cable box. So
long live New York City public access
yes,
TV.
It's still going on. You still have reruns of Margarita Prakatan. I always alert you to when there's like reruns of the people as dearly departed. Somehow they died, but their public access shows are still airing on MNN. It's amazing.
Did you, Ed, do you have any memories of coming to any of our Beyond Vaudeville tapings?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. I was going to mention that if you gave me the chance. The one person I love more than anyone, and I got to see Imogen Coca, and I saw Billy Barty, and I saw some great legends of showbiz, but your Neil Connie Wallace blew me out of the water, because he positioned himself such that he did the comedy, and I don't think the TV audience ever got this, why we in the audience were laughing so much. He positioned himself and did all his comedy to one of your walls in the studio, and he didn't look at us, and we were a ready audience. It was like myself, my friend John Walsh, all of us are there like, yeah, and he was literally just not facing us, and that made us laugh more, because he did his entire stand-up routine to a wall. It was gold. But yeah, that was my favorite, and just seeing Imogen Coca in person, tiny little lady and stuff, and I got Billy Barty's autograph on his record, his Billy Barty Foundation record.
Oh, wow.
Kind of things. So those were wonderful appearances, but nobody beats Neil Connie. I wish someone would find him. We could send out an alert for, does anyone know if Neil Connie is still with us anywhere in the world?
Yes, Neil Connie is one of our MIA performers. Scott Allen saying, did Ed call him Petey Ustinov? It sounds like something
Peter,
Joe Franklin said.
Sir Peter. No, I didn't call him Petey. I don't get that familiar. I never address them by their first name unless they demand that I do that. I don't do that. That's a little creepy. Petey.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody who was in the chat here and offering some questions and thoughts. And we really appreciate it. If you don't already subscribe to our Beyond Vaudeville YouTube channel, please do so you'll be alerted when we're doing stuff like this. And Ed, I hope we can do this again. You're a font of knowledge when it comes to all things entertainment and otherwise. So thanks again. And everybody, we'll be doing this again soon. Don't forget, this Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, David Green, for the first time, is going to be on Rich Brown Rewind. What we can expect, we don't know. Do you have any predictions, Ed?
I have no idea. I mean, that's a wild one for me, that Joe Franklin episode, because he talks. Because there was a point where he just stopped talking completely and just hit people. But when he used to talk, and the one who made him laugh, was it Brother Theodore or Al Lewis? One of them made him actually break, and he broke.
Yes, Al Lewis. That's right.
Al Lewis made him break. Yeah, he suddenly goes, "Schmuck, what are you doing?" And he suddenly broke. And it's the only time in the history I think of any Oddville Beyond Vaudeville that there was David Green for real started laughing hysterically at Al Lewis. And it's like, wow.
Well, if there's one thing that's predictable about David Green, he is unpredictable. So, yeah, tune in Monday night and be sure to subscribe, spread the word. Beyond Vaudeville forever. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Cool.